So I'd like to thank everybody for coming here this evening and welcome to LWD's second Fringe meeting. I'm repeating myself, but it's because I'm reading my notes. So whether you are in person or on our live stream on the LWD YouTube channel, welcome everybody. And so it's my absolute pleasure to be here today to chair this Labour Women's Declaration panel event on how Labour can champion the freedom of women and girls. And I've always been a feminist. I've been a bit of a ranty woman in my kind of menopausal years. But the rights of women and girls have always been a significant driving force of mine. Indeed, representing women was one of the reasons why I entered into politics in the first place. And if you look back at the advances made for women, the legislation passed, including the Equality Act, the majority of them were implemented by a Labour government. So, and the Labour Party is so important for women. But women's hard-won rights can never be taken for granted. We just can't, and we've seen that because we've taken it for granted, and look where we are today. And it's not, it's not acceptable. Women continue to face oppression as a sex, and modern times has generated new forms of it. Our lives are shaped by our physical differences. And, we are so different from men. If we look at sport and all of the, areas, there is a huge difference. And it's not just about that, but it's also about the cultural meanings as well. The oppression women endure as a sex in all its forms absolutely has to be tackled. And in order to tackle it, we've got to talk about it. And that's what I feel passionately about as a Labour Member of Parliament. So at the very least, sex, ceases to be thought of and talked about. We have to recognise it, address sex-based oppression around the world, not just here in the UK, but it has to be beyond. And that's why events like this are so important to all of us. And it's fabulous to see a number of you here and, in solidarity in the room on this issue. So we have an excellent panel of speakers who will be talking about the steps the Labour should take to end the oppression of women as a sex, tackle male violence, and challenge expectations and pressures on girls in education and schools, protect the rights of women with disabilities, of women in sport, support women internationally, and defend single-sex spaces, and organise the fight for the freedom of women and girls. So we're going to hear from our panellists on each of their topics shortly. They may digress, you know what it's like. With plenty of time for questions at the end, so I'm going to be a really mean chair as well, okay? So expect to be told off. We will have 2 roaming microphones, possibly 3 if you're lucky. Then we're going to break for a reception starting at 8:30. So building on the topic of last night's Fringe, and trigger warning, not all of us agree on everything. But you'll be all right with that, won't you?
I want England to win the rugby.
You've got no hope of England winning the rugby.
I actually don't care.
She doesn't give a stuff. Thank God for that. And also, as we've already know, we've got something else to celebrate, is Jess's birthday. So it was mine last week, it was Holly Lynch's yesterday, it's Anna Turley's yours, and David Cameron's today. But I think I share mine with Adolf Hitler, so I don't know what that says about me. So we... So I shouldn't have said that really, should I? I'm good at that, but allegedly, I don't know, I haven't checked. My brother told me, because he's mean. So anyway, we'll go to our first speaker, moving swiftly onwards. Jess Phillips, the Member of Parliament for Birmingham Yardley, Shadow Minister for Domestic Violence and Safeguarding, and General Tidy Woman. Before politics, Jess also worked for Women's Aid. She's here to talk to you about elements of Labour's approach of ending violence against women and girls. She's winging it because she's brilliant and she knows her brief really, really well. Over to you, Jess. You've got 5 minutes.
Thanks, everybody. What a lovely birthday celebration you put on for me here. You really didn't have to. My dad literally just texted me to say, "Oh, happy birthday." And my son forgot when I spoke to him, so maybe that's where I get my view on men. I'm here to talk about the Labour Party's approach to ending men's violence against women, and I say it in those terms even though the brief that was given to me was the more classic ending violence against women and girls, but I think that we have to call it what it is, that we are actually trying to tackle, face it front on for us to be able to do anything about it. Because otherwise there are many cul-de-sacs that one can get drawn down in this particular area, and we have, for the first time, I have to say, a very, very singularly focused political, will. It is will to do something about this. The Labour Party has pledged in one of its 5 missions, it has put ending incidences of men's violence against women at the very, very heart of what it does. Now, if Rishi Sunak, every time he talked and he said those 5 things, his pledges, imagine if one of those 5 pledges was ending men's violence against women. Imagine if the Home Secretary had last week mentioned it in her speech. That would have been nice, wouldn't it, if she'd even mentioned it, which she didn't. And so the first thing I want to say is that, and I don't take, I don't take all the credit, I take some of it, that any Labour government will be laser focused as a priority, that when all I've ever wanted from any leader, and to be honest, happy birthday to David Cameron, if he'd done this I might have quite liked him. My husband always used to buy me a card with David Cameron's face on, but since he's become less relevant, he's got a moon pigot now. He can't, he has to get it made. When a Prime Minister stands on the steps of Downing Street and says that the single most important thing for any government is the safety and security of its people, they're not thinking about the people in this room. I mean, there are some men in here. They're usually thinking of men in Chinooks with uniforms. I want that to mean the safety and security of women, and how safety and security is felt for us. And I don't need to sit and go over the data about how shit it is to be raped in this country and the likelihood of justice. There are others who are going to talk about some of that. I don't need to tell you how woeful it is, how little people are believed, how few interventions there are that actually tackle the idea of masculinity, and why people end up as perpetrators who abuse women. But there is so little attention on the single biggest violent crime type in our country from a political class, that to get to the point where it is even a political priority, I think that some of the people in this room should pat themselves on the back, and the women in the country should stand up and applaud themselves, because that is the reason that has happened. And we have reasons to be cheerful in a time when it feels like all around the world, women as a sex class, if you think specifically of what's happening in the US around abortion law and elsewhere, certainly we're going to hear about what is happening to women in Afghanistan. What we see from the news today and over the last 3 days of women absolutely being used as a weapon in the conflict in Israel. There is so many reasons for us to think that we have stepped back. But I personally, in all my years of working in this field, I've never known the rights of women to have been more of a strong political issue. So give yourselves a round of applause. It matters. And so the Labour Party's approach will be led by myself and others, certainly Yvette Cooper, Shabana, who I believe spoke last night. Good up the Brummie women. We will make this a priority. As Tonia has said, pretty much all the advancements for women, whether it's the Equality Act, the only piece of legislation that actually advanced women to the kind of liberty that we have today that wasn't put in largely by Labour women was the Abortion Act, which actually was fought for by Labour women but was famously lobbied for by a Liberal man, although he would say it was absolutely Labour women who'd done the work behind the scenes. He has said that to me. And so we have to look forward to any Labour government basically getting back to that idea, the idea of the women's movement that meant that I went to Women's Liberation Playgroup when I was a child, because women self-organised. When things don't exist, women invent them. And my mother self-organised with other women, because there was no formalised childcare, to create a cooperative system so that the women could go out to work. That is what the women of the Labour movement do. That is what the women of the Labour movement in government will do again to ensure that this time it is men's violence against women and girls, whether it's in housing provision, whether it's in educational provision and prevention, whether it's in our woeful policing service that is currently being provided, whether it's in our slow and creaking justice system. There will not be room for the women's movement not to have their voice heard and to fight for just... Be wary always, women, and you're all cheering because you're able to get together at the Labour Party conference, which is good, and I know it's been a long road, but the fact of the matter is always be wary of being grateful for the basics. Yeah. Women are too often asked for, I'm basically asking that, rape be made illegal again. Like, I'm asking for the very basics. And only together, with women collectively organising together, will we ever achieve any one of those things. And so the Labour Party must create a place for women in the Labour movement to collectively push for their rights. And I will be right there at the vanguard with you. I could sit and tell you the policies that the Labour Party, from legal advocacy in rape cases for every rape victim to the worst offenders being. I can sit and I can reel them, but you can just read them in the newspapers. But the point is that we will achieve nothing if the women of the Labour movement don't take collective action. If every woman in this room goes to their local council when they come away from this meeting, whether it's Labour or not, and make a basic demand that, for example, migrant women aren't being left destitute because the council isn't properly undertaking Section 17 of the Children Act in cases of destitution of migrant women. The Labour movement women should organise together to make sure that when we pass laws that say that women should have a homelessness duty if they're in cases of domestic abuse, that somebody is actually making sure those laws are done. I am asking for your help and your collective action, because the Labour Party will fail if it is just legislation. All the Tories have done is make legislation. We need a movement of women to make sure that it actually means something in the lives of women in our country, and so I ask for your help.
Well, there's a call to arms for everybody, so let's get that sorted. She did go on for ages, but it's Jess Phillips, so I kind of I'll let her have 10 minutes, not 5. I'm nice like that, and I was tapping up my phone for her, but there you go. I'll cope as chair. Anyway, Dame Diana Johnson, my very good friend to my left here, is the Member of Parliament for Kingston upon Hull North and chair of the Home Affairs Select Committee. So if you ever watch that, you can see what absolute delights she's got to deal with from the Tories. Sorry, Diana. I'm just winging it now. Diana is here to talk to you about the criminal justice system, how it deals with women who have been assaulted or raped, and the issue of male perpetrators identifying as women, or whatever she wants to, really. So, over to you, Diana.
Okay, well, thank you very much. And can I just start by saying that I think it warms the cockles of my heart to hear that Yvette and Jess are going to be leading in government, when we get into government, to end male violence against women and girls and to ensure that we have the legislation and the enforcement that we need. So that is such a positive thing to hear, that those two really outstandingly strong women from Yorkshire and Birmingham are going to be leading the way. So that's an excellent start. As Tonia says, I chair the Home Affairs Select Committee. So every time we're in that committee hearings, I see how sex and women's oppression as a sex class impacts on some of the biggest and most complex areas of public policy, including the criminal justice system and the immigration system as well. And Jess is absolutely right, just passing laws does not mean to say you're going to solve the problem. You have to have the enforcement and the follow-through. Now, of course, sex and gender cut across every single area of government policy, and that's because, as we all know, the material reality of biological sex and the firmly entrenched ideas and expectations of gender are fundamental to who we are as people and how we organise as a society. Now, of course, as already been mentioned, Labour has a very proud history of introducing landmark laws to combat sexism and sex discrimination and promoting the equality of women and girls. And I'm therefore really grateful to the Labour Women's Declaration for organising this important event to explore how Labour can drive forward further gains in government. And I just want to briefly set out what I think should be 3 of Labour's priorities in government for women and girls. Now, one area that's already been spoken about by Jess is about the criminal justice system, which we know is failing victims of sexual violence in particular. And Labour has to address this, and we've got to deliver justice for victims. Now, the Home Affairs Select Committee has been had an inquiry into this area, and we've set out, I think, a very clear, comprehensive sweep of reforms that we believe should be enacted in order to increase the rape conviction rate and provide support to victims. And this includes ensuring that every police force has a specialist team dedicated to investigating rape. It's truly shocking that that is not already the case. We also know we need to improve data collection and accountability of the criminal justice agencies, and we need to establish a dedicated commissioner for sexual violence. And we know that leadership, funding, training and monitoring are all the things that are vital in reforming the criminal justice system so it works for women. And what's also clear to me personally is that clarity and commitment is required in relation to the provision of single-sex services throughout the criminal justice system, from support services to prisons. The need to uphold the single-sex services is necessary to ensure women and girls' safety and dignity, and its provision should be obvious and uncontroversial. So let's be very clear in our commitment to that. The second thing I just want to talk about briefly is on reproductive rights. Labour has to put an end to women being jailed for having abortions. Earlier this year, as we all know, a woman was sentenced to over 2 years in prison for having an abortion after the legal time limit. She was prosecuted under Section 58 of the Offences Against the Persons Act, a piece of legislation dating from 1861, and that carries a maximum sentence of life imprisonment. And while, thankfully, these are rare occurrences, we know there are many cases actually in the pipeline on this. It is wrong that any woman should face jail for ending her pregnancy. And let's be clear, decriminalisation of abortion does not mean deregulation of abortion provision. Time limits and other rules would still apply in any new regulatory regime. But what it means is that women would no longer face the threat of criminal prosecution for terminating a pregnancy. And Labour, I looked actually what Labour was saying in our MPF statement that we've agreed. I just want to read this to you. Labour believes that abortion is an essential part of healthcare which is highly regulated and should not be subject to custodial sanctions. Labour will provide parliamentary time for free votes on modernising abortion law to ensure women do not go to jail for getting an abortion at a vulnerable time. So when we get into government, we need to make sure that the Labour government is held to that promise. And the final thing I just want to talk about is commercial sexual exploitation. Labour has to take on the pimps and the pornographers. If we're really serious, if we are really serious about combating violence against women, as the Home Affairs Select Committee is currently having an inquiry into human trafficking, what we found is that demand from men who pay for sex is driving a very lucrative and prolific sex trafficking trade. Commercial pimping websites on which women are advertised for prostitution operate openly and freely, while men who sexually exploit women by paying for sex enjoy impunity. So as I've said many times in Parliament, I personally believe it's imperative that we criminalise pimping websites and paying for sex, decriminalise individuals who sell sex, and instead provide them with support and exiting services. To end the trafficking and sexual exploitation of women and girls, we must end the demand for it. And on pornography, which is filmed prostitution, Labour must crack down on the rampant abuses and harms of this trade. And as the APPG on commercial sexual exploitation set out in our report on pornography earlier this year, at a bare minimum, we must force pornography websites to verify the age and consent of every individual who features in pornography on their platform, give individuals in pornography the legal right to withdraw their consent at any time, and to that at any time to that content remaining online, and address pornography in legislation and policy as a form of violence against women and girls, because that is what it is. So just to conclude, we need new laws, we need new approaches, but most of all, I think we need courage. And I just want to quote from Millicent Fawcett, who said, "Courage calls to courage everywhere, and its voice cannot be denied." And that's how Labour can champion freedom for all women and girls. So thank you for listening to me today.
I'm a bit lost for words, actually, Diana. It's bloody brilliant. Thank you. So I'm now moving on to another legend, Baroness Dianne Hayter, our Labour peer, a long-standing feminist and politician. In fact, only yesterday during the LWD Fringe within the conference centre, she disclosed she was a feminist before she was a socialist. Impressive. Dianne is here to talk to you about cross-party work in the Lords, the need for single-sex provision for women, and whatever else she wants to say. So over to you, Dianne.
Thank you very much. When she says a legend, what she means is I'm very, very old. We're just talking about Jess's birthday. She's 30 years younger than I am. But she'll grow out of it.
I will. I hope.
It is hard for me to talk about freedom for us without acknowledging its absence for our very brave sisters in Afghanistan or in Iran, or indeed for lesbians in Uganda and elsewhere. And I'm really humbled to even be on the same platform as someone whose whole perspective makes me feel very privileged to be a woman in this country. So I hope she and others will forgive us, who by comparison are in a really good position to still complain and say there's more to do. So I hope we can be forgiven for that. Because it may look like trivia that we raise compared with women who are being so badly abused and don't have rights in those other countries to even dress as they want or anything else. But I do want to look at the challenges that we face here. And partly because, as it's not just me that's old, but actually our feminist movement is quite old in this country. And if we fail to stop the backtracking that's happening, and if we fail to continue our feminist movement, then that is quite a signal to other countries who look to us for leadership. And a lot of countries do. I mean, whenever we think we've got problems, there are a number who say, but you did so much more. So what we do is important for women in this country, but I think it's also an important signal to people elsewhere. And I'm just going to raise three, I hope, very quick issues to talk about, which are sport, single-sex provision, and the freedom to speak about these. Now on sport, it's very hard that I have to say that sport should be fair. Who would have thought that anyone from a public platform had to say that? You know, we've got the Paralympics, which have been phenomenal for enable people who don't have the same exact bodies as you know, other people to be able still to excel, to win gold medals and everything else. And we've seen that that is a way of having a very fair sport for people of similar physical backgrounds. And I think we've been very proud of what we've done on that. But so we just took for granted that that's why we have women's tennis, that's why we have women's rugby, that's why we have women's swimming and all of those sports, so that everyone can excel, not just men. And that this has given women the ability to have phenomenal careers as athletes. And as you know, one of our great Olympian athletes says, a swimmer, you know, when she was competing, she had to go against Russians, they were at the time, or Soviets, who were pumped up by drugs, by testosterone. And the idea now that women's sports people might have to compete against someone born a man who may have used some drugs to be able to compete as a woman is quite extraordinary. And I find it. I find it hard that I need to say it. But actually, yes, our bodies are different from men's. You know, I think we've got rather good bodies ourselves. But you know, let's run our own races and leave them to run theirs. Now, that is very important, as I say, at elite level of sports. But actually, there will be no women at elite levels if they can't compete at amateur, at grassroots. Because if a school is sending its top 3 girls to be able to compete, say, at county level, and that 2 of those 3 are actually boys, you are excluding already at that level girls from making the next step up. So, you know, let's stop this nonsense that there are certain men who can compete against women. Let us run our races, let them run theirs. And if we want to have a trans category, that's fine. But I understand that the 2 sports that then did open a trans category, there were no takers for it.
Funny that.
Funny that? Who'd have thought? In other words, they only wanted to compete against us, and they didn't really want to compete in any fairness. So, yeah, no to men in our sports. I think that's easy enough. And that's the park run as well, by the way. And that takes me on to single-sex provision, because actually, do I really need to say it? It just that we need our own provision, either for dignity or for privacy or for safety. It just seems to me this is so obvious. It's very hard that I need to come here. And I say to Michael Crick, who I have known and worked with for many, many years, I actually quite like him, but if he thinks that the odd rape in hospital is okay so as to allow men into women's wards, I say to Michael Crick, you've just got it wrong. There should be no men on women's wards. again, because I'm so old, I was involved, I think it was 40 or 45 years ago, of campaigning for single-sex wards, because there had been a period that not many of you in the room will remember, when there was a whole move to move toward mixed wards. And we campaigned and we stopped that. So the idea now that we're getting men back into our wards, no to that. And the other issue about this is that going to, sex attacks on women and girls, we also know, I don't think Jess actually mentioned this, that one of the precursors is flashing. And yet here we have a whole lot of people who say they are concerned about attacks on women and girls, but seem to think it's quite all right for male genitalia to walk into the changing rooms of women changing for sports. Now, my granddaughter swims in a polo team. I mean, I don't want her changing and finding a man walking into her changing rooms. Is that too much to ask? Good, I'm glad about that, because sometimes there's been time I was thinking, my God, do I really need to say that? So let's have no to flashing, and it is really important, not just for the young girls. I could put up with a man flashing and I can know how to deal with it, but actually us old women, we have some dignity that we want to support too, and I don't want them wandering in when I'm half-dressed. Not a pretty sight, and they shouldn't be there. So no to any of that, and no to having, without their permission, any of our disabled or any other women in hospital or at home having intimate care from somebody. No. And finally, our freedom even to say these things. The idea that I've had to say that, and that some of us have not been able to, in public meetings, to say the things I've just said, which actually are just so obvious. I do say, not to the men in this room because you're here, but to the men outside, it is time you stood up and supported the rights of women to talk about the rights of women. Because we will be like Putin's Russia, or we will be about Iran, if we are shutting down the ability for, or hounding women for saying biological men are not biological women. Even those people who may disagree with me on that, I think rather easy statement, I think there's two sexes in the world, there's them and there's us. But even if people who don't agree with that, surely every person in the Labour movement should be standing up to say, I have the right to say that. Because that is a really big issue for the future of democracy. I said it yesterday, and I'm sorry I'm going to repeat it, but George Orwell said, if liberty means anything at all, it means the right to tell people what they do not want to hear. Now, I can't believe there is anyone who doesn't want to believe that there are men and there are women and they're two different categories, but there you are. We must fight for the right and the freedom of all of us in our own political party, at ward level, at constituency level, in Parliament, or here at party conference, to say something rather simple. Because honestly, we cannot stand up and talk about the rights of people and women in Iran if we don't do the very minimum, which is allow us to speak openly here. Thanks for all being here today. I'm sorry that it needs it.
And I'm moving on to Dr. Karen Ingala-Smith, Labour Party member. Welcome, sister. Karen is the co-founder and executive director of the Femicide Census and former chief exec of and now ambassador for NIA, a charity supporting women's victim survivors of men's violence, and the author of Defending Women's Spaces. If you haven't got it or read it, you have to. It's incredible, and this is about the importance of single-sex spaces, particularly for women survivors of men's violence. Quite a few members of Parliament had this delivered to their door. I got in my Clio, drove to NIA, managed to stuff my car full of the books and took them and deposited them through the internal mailing service. I probably shouldn't be saying that, but
Thank you.
Can I just say, it was the most hilarious comedy sketch you've ever seen, but I can tell you it was worth it. And also, I'm a whip, and so to put that book on my desk and have a reaction to it, obviously, makes me feel very empowered as a woman MP. So thank you to you, Karen. I digress from my notes. Again. Funny that. But Karen is here to talk about how Labour can end male violence against women and girls, and off you go. I would say 5 minutes, but really I've given everybody else 10, so take the floor.
Great. Chair, I also want to digress from my notes for 5 minutes, or for 1 minute, but wow, the difference in language from the MPs on this panel tonight compared to last year is incredible. Last year, it felt like only Rosie and Tonia had the guts to talk about what we knew as women about women's sex-based rights. So Jess and Dianne, thank you. Thank you for listening to women and moving with us. And everybody here, the women here, ordinary women who have for years worked to make this change happen. Here's to us. Right. Back to where I was supposed to be.
Oh, sorry, I'm interjecting now.
All right.
Diana was there last year as well.
She was, but she didn't. There's been a change in the language. There absolutely has. Anyway, back to speech. In the last year, since we met last year, 2,186 women and girls in England and Wales every day have been subjected to sexual assault, but less than 2 in 100 rapes recorded by the police in 2022 resulted in a charge, let alone a conviction. In the last year, an estimated 1,006,071 women in England and Wales were subject to domestic violence and abuse. And in the last year, we can name at least 110 women and girls aged over 14 who've been killed by men. The average of one woman in the UK killed by a man every 3 days has been constant and consistent in the 15 years that the Femicide Census has been recording these killings. And it's not an either-or for many women. The reality of women's lives is that many cross boundaries between forms of sexual and domestic violence and abuse. The crime figures that we know are the tip of the iceberg of men's violence against and abuse of women and girls. There are countless other crimes, microaggressions, and behaviours which don't meet crime thresholds, but do negatively affect, restrict, and reduce lives of women and girls. So how do we consign this everyday normal of men's abuse of females to history? Top of the list, I'm going to put that we need to see the connections between all forms of men's violence against women and girls, rape and other forms of sexual violence, intimate partner violence and abuse, coercive control, prostitution, FGM, pornography, sexual harassment. We need to put them all together to be able to identify the roots. This is necessary for meaningful social change. Seeing these connections is an absolutely critical step in ending men's violence against women, but it's an early step and it's a very, very long road, and there are constantly pushbacks, sometimes dressed up as progression. In 2010, the then coalition government launched its strategy, the Call to End Violence Against Women and Girls. That strategy has been revised twice, but just over a decade later, under the Conservative government, and after many years in the making, we see the creation of the Domestic Abuse Act. And in this, the concept of the connections between the different forms of men's violence against women and girls is overshadowed by a so-called landmark piece of legislation that crosses the sexes. A significant minority of us believe that this was an opportunity missed, and what we would have chosen instead was a Men's Violence Against Women Act. So whilst it's good that concepts that were once only understood by feminists have become mainstream, the problem is that when this happens, the feminist foundations of those concepts are usually washed out by the time they become policy, and this renders them much less effective. Another thing, and I know Jess has already said this, but I'm not going to miss saying it again, is that we can't shy away from naming the agent men. Man singular and men plural as perpetrators. Men as a sex class of beneficiaries, and patriarchy as a social order which is shaped and reproduces itself in men's interests. It should be inconceivable that one of the significant barriers that we've had to address, an issue that has taken up inordinate amounts of feminist time and energy, is being able to say what a woman is and what a man is, and yet that's the story of the last decade. If we cannot measure sex in data, we cannot measure sex differences, we cannot measure sex inequality, and we cannot measure who does what to whom across the forms of sexual and domestic violence and abuse. Without the ability to do this, policy interventions will inevitably be arrows shot in the dark. It took a grassroots, crowd-funded judicial review led by Fair Play for Women for the ONS to agree to define the sex question in the 2021 England and Wales Census on the basis of sex, not gender identity. It took women's direct action, it took women's money, it took women standing together and saying no. It should be to any legislator's shame that that was necessary. The government spends millions on responding to men's violence against women and girls, amounts that the feminists who began building the network of women's refuges and rape crisis services just over 50 years ago would not have dared to dream of. So why are we not seeing the evidence that men's violence against women is reducing? The main reason, in my opinion, is that most interventions focus on individuals who are violent and institutions that respond to that violence, and a bit of mealy-mouthed nod to prevention, something that they called healthy relationships every now and again. These interventions have largely been taken out of their feminist framework. While perpetrators must, of course, be held responsible for their actions and behaviours, men's violence against women is not simply reducible to individual acts perpetrated by individual men. It is key to men's domination of women, and it is supported and normalised by patriarchal institutions, attitudes, and social norms and values. There's a high degree of negative correlation between sex equality and rates of men's violence against women. That is, as equality increases, violence against women decreases. Cultural concepts of masculinity and femininity need to be got shut of, certainly not embedded in the way that they are in transgender identity ideology. The objectification of women and the sexualisation of that objectification needs to end. It's long overdue for Labour to have a policy position on ending prostitution. Sex equality is not possible when one sex is for sale, when women are a commodity and the other sex is the vendor and the buyer, with consumer rights, of course. We need not only to hold men to account, we need not only to ensure that policing, the law, the budget, education systems are not sexist and misogynistic by design. We must also address the factors in an individual which create violence. We must eradicate sex inequality, and we must absolutely uproot the social and cultural context that supports men's violence against women. So this takes us back to my first point, making the connections across different forms of men's violence against women. If we want to end that violence, we need responses that acknowledge that whilst either sex can be victim or perpetrator, in most crimes in patriarchal societies, violent crimes reflect sex inequality and patriarchal cultural values. Different forms of violence share root causes, and creating silos around those different forms of violence, which disregard sex, moves us away from seeing and addressing the root causes. So what does Labour need to do? Labour needs to listen to feminists. Labour needs to stop watering down our insights in an effort to appease the what about the men's, the defensive men, the men who think women's sex-based rights and protections are not a foreground issue for the party, the men who think that the concept of patriarchy is a feminist conspiracy theory, the men who think that men can be women, or who are afraid to say that they know that women cannot and do not have a penis. But first, Labour needs to get elected. So Labour needs to let women know that our voices are heard and that our needs and rights are prioritised if it wants to count our votes.
Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday, dear Jess. Happy birthday to you. Hip hip hooray. As we say in Wales, shaming. You loves it. Brilliant. Thanks, Jess, and thank you for that. And Karen, what an absolute top woman you are. The work you've done and honestly, the determination to get back into the party, honestly, it's just wonderful and it's great to have you back. Now, on to another wonderful woman. We have Lexi Ellingworth, co-founder of Stop Surrogacy Now UK. Now, Lexi has worked for non-profit organisations throughout her career, and her interests are centred around women and children and their human rights. She founded Stop Surrogacy Now UK in 2019 in direct response to the UK Law Commission's public consultation that year on surrogacy law reform. Now, she's here today to talk about the issues around surrogacy and specific concerns with the draft bill published by the Law Commission in March this year. So over to you, Lexi.
Good evening. Thank you so much to Kerri and the Labour Women's Declaration for inviting me to speak and join this phenomenal panel of extraordinary women this evening. It's a real privilege. As I've been introduced, I'm the co-founder of Stop Surrogacy Now UK, a grassroots campaign group which formed 4 years ago in response to a public consultation by the Law Commission, which was to relax the surrogacy laws in this country. We've all been asked to address this question this evening of how Labour can champion freedom for women and girls. All of us here recognise the unequal world in which women and girls have to live. We understand the male violence against women, the sexist attitudes and regressive beliefs we impose upon women and girls, and the highly sexualised culture which permeates the world in which girls have to grow up. We live in a world of femicide, rape going unpunished, consumption of pornography at an all-time high, domestic violence and coercive control spiralling, and all the time, increasingly, in a world where we're not allowed words to name ourselves or the specific female experience which shapes our lives. A Labour government which sides with women and, crucially, listens to women, engages with women and meets with women, working with us to help tackle these issues, will be making moves in the right direction. Stop Surrogacy Now UK, along with our sister organisation, Surrogacy Concern, are currently raising awareness of the Law Commission's proposals to liberalise surrogacy law in the UK. Surrogacy directly affects women and children by its very nature, and is an issue with the vulnerability of young working class women and women from ethnic minority backgrounds particularly comes into play. On this issue, it's critical for us to be able to share our concerns with Labour MPs and as Labour seeks to form the next government. For those who haven't come across them, the Law Commission's proposals tip the balance away from the surrogate mother towards the commissioning parent or parents. It reduces the time a surrogate mother has to change her mind. It removes the surrogate mother from the birth certificate, even in instances where she has used her own egg and the child is genetically as well as biologically hers. The proposals make the commissioning parents the legal parents at birth, meaning the surrogate mother is never the legal parent of her own child, and they propose a minimum age of 18 for commissioning parents and just 21 for surrogate mothers. They don't require a woman to have had children or have completed her own family before becoming a surrogate mother. And they allow for open advertising for surrogate mothers, meaning women who have never considered doing this before will be sucked into this as the industry explodes due to growing demand. The expenses regime, which sees significant sums of money change hands, would continue, and this acts as a very real incentive, a financial incentive, to women from poorer backgrounds to become surrogate mothers. It enables a growth in surrogacy arrangements between strangers and legitimises a practice which many people have deep reservations about. These proposals would also continue to allow people to bring children into this country who have been conceived and carried through commercial surrogacy arrangements abroad. These are often exploitative, in the full knowledge that these children will never see their birth mothers again. The Law Commission and surrogacy agencies would have you believe that these reforms are being suggested as a way of just tidying up a grey area in the law, of ensuring that legal parentage means medical procedures can be approved for newborns more easily, and that the reforms bring clarity, when in reality they enable and legitimise separating mothers and babies, an act which we know runs counter to all NHS guidance and known best practice on bonding and attachment between mother and child in the early years, and encourage women to be detached from their own pregnancies. The issue of surrogacy goes to the heart of equality for women and girls, seeing women and girls as human beings, not body parts to be rented out, our reproductive capabilities commodified. We are approaching Labour MPs in a spirit of good faith, wanting an open, two-way conversation about how to safeguard women and how to put children's rights and our responsibilities to them above the desires and wants of adults. We hope Labour will meet with us in the coming months, and we urge any incoming Labour government not to take these reforms forward. If Labour wants to prove it's on the side of women and show it understands our sex-based needs, then ditching the plans by the Law Commission would be an excellent start. We have a briefing on the proposals written with surrogacy concern. You can find us on Twitter at Rooms Not For Rent, and you may have seen a postcard on your chair which you can send to your MP. And finally, if anyone is attending Filia, please come and find us. If you would like to know more, please feel free to contact us at any time. Thank you.
Thank you, Lexi. And I know that it is something that is hitting our inboxes and something that we need to be talking about as members of Parliament, and it is difficult. So thank you for the work that you're doing in order for us to have even more difficult conversations. But yeah, thank you very much. And going to our next speaker, who is a pretty formidable woman, along with the other formidable women on this panel this evening and in the room, I'd like to say. Kerri Tunks is a teacher. Oh, God, I know that feeling. And a trade union activist holding several officer positions in the NEU. Pretty impressive. She won the NEU Annie Higdon Award in recognition for her work to engage women in union activity and to challenge sexism. A Labour Party member and co-founder of Women's Place UK. And we know that, you know, when you've had events as Women's Place UK, the abuse that you've had has been absolutely horrific. So for you to be on this panel tonight with us is really a great honour, Kiri, and you are a fantastic woman. Kiri's here this evening to talk to us about what women can do to challenge sexism in the workplace, trade unions and the labour movement, and generally whatever she wants to. Over to you, Kiri.
Well, first of all, I'd just like to thank you for being such a pleasant and non-abusive audience so far. Anyway, I mean, it could. I know I've spoken too soon. It could go wrong. And normally I stand up to speak, but I feel like I've been told to stick very close to this microphone, so I'm not going to do that. But if I wave my arms about, sorry for that. So the question is, what can Labour do for women and girls? And I do want to start by thanking Labour Women's Declaration and all its supporters. I mean, Labour Women's Declaration's relentless refusal to be shut down or shut up has been nothing short of inspirational. So I'm really delighted to be here. I'm really proud to know many of the women involved, and I am really proud to be a Labour Women's Declaration signatory. The impact your work has had on Labour and its policy is self-evident. I have absolutely no doubt that you will continue to push the party in the right direction. But it really shouldn't have been a struggle, and other speakers have talked about this already. You can't believe how hard it has been to try and get this argument heard and to be able to have our voices heard. Women are the backbone of this party. We are its history and we are its future. Given our history in the movement, it is absolutely astonishing that our voices have been silenced, misrepresented, traduced and ignored for so long. But as we all know, this kind of sexism and misogyny is not, it's age-old. It's not just limited to the Labour Party. Nearly every political and civil organisation in this country is culpable in the silencing of women and the dismissal of our concerns. But because it is treatment that women are used to, like I say, it's age-old, we have also become pretty adept at challenging it. Labour Women's Declaration, the latest in a long line of women who have refused to be put down and who have persisted in our organising. Struggle is in the DNA of women and we will not be kept down. So my plea really to everyone, not just the leadership or the official representatives or the councillors or the MPs, but to everybody within the Labour Party, is to stop fighting against us and start working with us. Because as you have seen, women will organise and we are relentless where our rights are concerned. These are qualities that Labour needs to harness, not oppose. But be clear, we will organise regardless. Many of the gains this movement has won for women have been initiated by women ourselves through grassroots organising and as part of our daily lives. I'm going to give just a couple of examples from my kind of own experience, and you will think of others for yourself, to illustrate what I mean by this, and I hope by way of inspiration. So the first example is when the government and the EHRC and other organisations tasked with providing it has still failed to produce guidance on sex and gender for teachers, for schools. A group of teachers got together to produce this guidance. I'm just going to hold it up, but there are copies on the table outside. It's called A Teacher's Guide to Sex and Gender, and it's exactly what the government should have produced but has failed to. Now, the teachers that produce this guidance work in different phases across the UK, and they've got a collective experience of decades. The guidance has been researched and developed in evenings and at weekends, and the cost of publishing these hard copies and establishing a website have been funded by the women themselves. It's a document based in reality and with a solid understanding of safeguarding and the needs of children, and I really do commend it to you. Now, while it's shameful that these women have had to produce and fund the publication of this document on top of their day jobs, which I can say as a teacher, it's a pretty pressured job. It's actually also inspiring because these women are writing from experience and insight, and that is experience and insight that many policy advisors and politicians just don't have. So please do pick up a copy later. The second thing I want to talk about is we are talking about Labour, but Labour is also part of a much bigger Labour movement. And I think it would be remiss not to talk about trade unions and the workplace in a meeting of this kind. I know how badly many women feel let down by their trade unions. I know... I know that many women have left their unions or see no point in joining. I do get that. But I have to say, as a trade unionist with now over 30 years' experience of activism within the NEU and previously the NUT, I can tell you it is possible to win change, and it is necessary that we do that. By organising with other women and men within the union, in the NEU, we have managed to use the rule book to challenge the union, we've used the union structures to change the rules, and we've made the rules and the union work better for women. Some examples, just to show you that I'm not making it up. Speakers at all NEU conferences are now ordered female, not female, ordering to a big increase in the number and diversity of all speakers, including women. All NEU delegations must comprise at least 50% women. The NEU Executive Committee must be comprised of at least 2/3 women. 66 of NEU workplace reps are women. Women are routinely centred in the making of policy and organising, and the union has excellent policy on sexual harassment, domestic violence, the menopause and abortion rights. These things are not perfect in the NEU. There are still many issues. There's a lot of work to be done, but it has come a long way since I started teaching back in 1993. And we have made that progress because women organised together to make a change. And that is really important. We cannot give up on our unions. We cannot give up on the Labour Party. People often say that we shouldn't trust political promises or leaders. I've heard it a lot. I've heard it a lot this week about, yeah, well, you can't believe them. You can't trust the word they say. There is particularly widespread scepticism about Labour's position on sex and gender. And I understand that. That's understandable given recent history. But I say this. Politicians move, but politicians move because we make them. There will never be a time when we can say thank you very much and hand over the fight for women's rights to the politicians and leave them to it. We need to be involved at every level of the political scene, in our communities, in our workplaces, in our unions and our political parties. And to the Labour Party, the unions and the wider Labour movement, we say, we are your members. We are your activists. We are your allies. Do not try and shut us out. Do not try and shut us down. It will not work. We want to work with you. We want to work with you to make things better for women and girls. Work with us. Thank you.
On that note, we've got some brilliant people in the audience this evening. But first of all, I want to mention Zura is coordinating relief work in relation to this week's earthquake. So Labour Women's Declaration are publicising the link, so you can make a donation if you wish. And please do consider making a donation, and you will be emailed, and it'll be out on social media as well, so please look out for that. We've also got, I have mentioned it, many icons of the women's liberation movement, especially Selma Taha in the room. We've also, got quite a few people here. Selma Taha from Southall Black Sisters. Where are you? Are you here? You're a wonderful woman as well. So big up to you. And everybody this year is an absolute legend anyway. So big up to all of us. Okay, so where is my very good friend Rosie Duffield? Stick your hand in the air like you just don't care. There she is. Rosie, thanks for coming along this evening. I know we're all very much on the same page, and it's been particularly difficult for you. I can get up in the chamber, Karen Smith can get up in the chamber and not take anything. You get up in the chamber, same debate, and you get shit tons of abuse, and it's just not fair. You don't behave on social media as well as we do, mind you, but I just wanted to say, Rosie, have you got? Would you like to ask any questions or say a few words? Would you like to come up the front and say something? If you can, now's the opportunity to do so.
Thank you so much for chucking me in the deep end. Okay.
You love it.
First of all, the only thing I really need to say is thank you to all of you, actually, every single one of you, because sometimes it is a scary and a lonely place kind of being out there, and every single one of you that supports me on Twitter, I can't necessarily like all the things you say, but I agree with all of it, and you're spot on, all of you as well, and you know, you are holding the Labour Party to account, like Kiri and Karen and everyone have said, and that is really important. We are the majority of activists, the majority of voters, the majority of people that go out and deliver leaflets. Labour needs us women, and just because the men are at the top, we can't be ignored. So let's keep on holding the Labour Party to account and keep on demanding our rights. That's so, so important. And we can't do it on our own. We really need all of you, each individual person and everyone in a group collectively. So thank you so, so much, because it makes life a bit easier for me. I am a bit isolated in Parliament. I have obviously been sort of glued to the backbenches by Keir and the people who I embarrass, and that won't change while he's the leader, and that's okay. I didn't come to Parliament to be on the front bench, but it would be a bit nice to be asked sometimes, and you lot all do keep me going, so thank you very much. And I have to say, the next hill I'm going to die on, and quite possibly literally, is probably Lexi's campaign about surrogacy, because no one else, I mean, Diana has done stuff about this in Parliament, but and I know not everybody agrees, but basically it's another way of erasing women and erasing mothers and just erasing our rights to our bodies. And I think we have to really understand what's going on. It's becoming an industry, and Lexi and Sex Matters are really doing a lot on this. So watch me get cancelled yet again, because that's going to happen in the next few months. And all of you that can support us in that, and just understand how it is an industry, women's bodies, but particularly, like she said, poor women's bodies are another industry, just like prostitution. We can't just let that happen. So please go and see her at Filia. I'm not going to go, because as much as I'm going to miss it, and Karen, I'm going to get massive FOMO. You know, it's just too much after all of this. But yeah, that's the next thing. So please all just at least, if you don't think you agree now, just have a read about who it affects and what's going on, and educate yourselves about that if you don't know. But thank you again, everyone. I've said enough rubbish now, so back to you guys. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Rosie. And also, when I think about when somebody says to me, but you know, why does it matter? You're all right. And I'm just going, as a member of Parliament, you meet many, many vulnerable people. And it's not just as a member of Parliament, whatever your line of work, if you're a councillor, if you work in public services. And that vulnerable person for me is the woman in prostitution that I met that was crying because she'd lost her children into care, not just foster care, into permanent care. And she would never see them again, and she had to say goodbye to them while her pimp was standing over her, and she had to go back to work to get her next hit. That's the woman I think about when I think about men in women's prisons, when I think about men in women's spaces. That's the woman I think about. I don't think about me, I think about them. And I think that's what we have to keep at the heart of women and who we are focusing on. Because we have a privilege, many of us do, and so many women don't, and that's our job, to stand up for each and every single one of them. Right then, this is when I've got to be teacher-like and laser-like. We have two roaming microphones. Put your hand up if you want to ask anybody on the panel a question. And then I expect you to be very brief. You're going to get a minute. I'm going to be strict, because I haven't been strict tonight at all. And it's a question to a person or persons on the panel. Pick your person, say who you are and where you come from. Because we're in Liverpool, aren't we? So I can say that. Okay, anybody?
Hello, I'm Mandy from Liverpool, and hello. And I just want to bring greetings to Labour Women's Declaration from the Green Women's Declaration, which launched on the 4th of August with 155 founding signatories, which had taken us 6 months to do behind the scenes. And we now, as of today, 2 months later, we have 1,150 signatories.
That is impressive.
We realise this is, we are very much your little sisters, but just wanted to let you know that at Green Party conference this weekend in Brighton, Green Women's Declaration leaflets were in the hall. Many conversations were had. The Green Women's Declaration banner was permanently outside the main entrance, being held by Emma Bateman, who some of you may have heard of. Just to say we have broken no debate, and we will not be silenced, and thank you for your inspiration.
That is absolutely brilliant, because we are cross-party. We do reach out. We might not always agree. We don't always agree on everything. But is there anybody on the panel that would like to make a comment about that? Dianne?
Well, can I just say I absolutely welcome it, because I've worked a lot in the House of Lords across party. As the Chair said earlier, I was a feminist before I was a socialist, so it's actually quite easy to work cross-party for some of us. And what I think is incredible is how shared our difficulties are within our own parties. It's been really interesting. So we've learnt a lot from each other.
Anybody else? Oh yeah, but well done you.
Good evening, Chair. My name's Siobhan and I'm from Hammersmith, where I have been educated by somebody who should be here and would be here normally but is busy, and that's Joan Smith. I know a great friend of you all.
Yeah, excellent woman.
Yes, I sent her a photo earlier, sending her greetings from here. I know there are very many issues that were already discussed tonight and highlighted, but there's another one in there which is important, and it links to the point around data, and that's around women's health. And also the way that we're being referred to as, people who get pregnant or people who get cervix cancer, etc., etc. I know it's an issue that's important, but we won't get the proper treatment. A lot of women already struggle to understand some of the illnesses that are associated with being female, and they will be missed out entirely. So it's really important that we make sure that is something we bang on, along with all the other brilliant reasons that have been highlighted. Thank you.
I mean, you've made a very valid point, and I know I asked Karen and Dianne to say something, but I would like Dianne to come back and say, make a comment on that, because of the work that you've been doing, Dianne, around this.
Can I just say, as a result of, I think you all saw about the GMC coming out with without mentioning women, coming out with a menopause and a maternity. So I put down some written questions, but even more, I've got on Tuesday week, on the 17th, I've got an oral question in the Lords, which is to ask His Majesty's Government what discussions they've had with the General Medical Council on its removal of the words mother and women from their internal guidance for pregnant or menopausal, and whether this reflects advice to doctors on how to treat and describe patients. I will get into trouble for the Labour Party for putting that question down, because it will be a Conservative minister who answers, who will come out very strongly, I hope, and say that they will talk to the doctors that actually we're women who have babies and we're women who have menopause.
Okay, next.
Somebody here and at the back.
Go for it, Joanne, because I'm blind with these lights.
Hello, Tonia. It's Ruth George from High Peak, and I'm now in one of the most marginal seats in the country. I'm not standing again, but we have had some really close by-elections, and on this issue, it showed me how important it is to the party electorally when last year we had a by-election in a really working-class area. So many women there who work in very low-paid jobs, absolutely desperate for a Labour council, for a Labour government. And the first thing the Tories did at the start of that by-election was put out social media saying, why should women vote Labour when they're referred to as people with a cervix? And that gained so much traction around that estate and around the local social media circles. And we lost that seat. We should never have lost that seat. We lost women's votes, women who desperately needed a Labour government and Labour policies. And that is what makes me really angry, that we are, by the labels we use, we are turning off the women who need us most. So thank you so much for all you're doing, and for all the women in this room for all you're doing as well. Thank you.
Ruth, I'm going to kind of respond to that, and if anybody else wants to, just going to give me a poke. People say it doesn't come up on the doorstep. I mean, I just want to say what Karen said. Okay, bollocks. It does. It does come up on the doorstep. It comes up on my doorsteps. I have a very mixed, geographic and demographic constituency, which is also still marginal. And it does come up on the doorsteps. What we've got, however, and this is something I want to say, is we have got, and it really upset me last week to hear every single Tory last week, every minister, every chancellor, bloody, what they call them, whatever, Secretary of State, standing up and mentioning the fact that the Labour Party don't know what a woman is and that they know what a woman is, and Rishi had to say it. It's really tiresome, because our party position has absolutely shifted into the right place, and I would like to give, and I know there will be people that disagree with me in the room, but Labour Women's Declaration, the women on this panel, the people in this room have helped the Labour Party to shift into the right place, to put self-ID in the bin. Where we go to next is a work, we have to work together, we have to be collegiate, we have to talk to people that we maybe not want to talk to, and we have to move the conversation on. But we have to have the conversation, and the fact that we've held 2 fringe events here and there's been no bother at all is absolutely tantamount to where we are. It is testament to where we are as a society, and we have moved on in a year, Ruth. We have moved on as a party and as a society, and I will not have the Tories politicise people's lives and women's lives to their gain, because it's not right. We have to be able to work this out, all of us politically, cross-party, and it does come up on the doorstep, and we know what a woman is. It's an adult human female, so please do not be afraid to say that. And when people say, and what really annoys me is what we're told that, oh, that's a trope, oh, this is a trope, oh, that's a trope. I'm like, they're going, so a dictionary definition is now a trope. Get out of my face, it isn't. Okay, it is not a trope, it's a fact. We support everybody, and we just, anyway, I'm ranting. So does anybody else want to come in on my rant?
I do.
Yeah, go on.
I'm so used to seeing on that thing that used to be called Twitter X, people saying, it's just electioneering from Labour, I don't trust them. And what I want to say to each and every one of them is, so what? You want another fucking 5 years of the Tories?
Oh yeah, well said, Karen. As she reaches for her water. Next.
Thank you. Janice Chapman from North Wales, mum's from Liverpool.
Shemai.
So, Shemai, yes, thank you. A little Shemai. Right, okay, so I'm here representing women and girls the group Back to 60, cedaronlaw.com, looking for the rights of all women and girls and wanting to know where Women's Labour stands on having CEDAW in domestic law to protect women's rights. CEDAW is the Council for the Elimination of Discrimination Against Women. It is ratified in law, was done by Thatcher, but has never been taken any further. And I just think, if we had CEDAW, would we have to still be sitting here? They have it in Afghanistan. Thank you to whoever.
Okay. Anybody on the panel want to talk about CEDAW? Go on, Karen.
I just would agree that it's an absolutely vital piece of legislation, and I guess it enshrines the connections that I was talking about between different forms of men's violence against women and girls, and the absolute critical importance. I think, well, it makes clear that that violence is a manifestation of sex inequality, and that sex inequality needs to be addressed to address men's violence against women and girls. So I would hope that if Labour get in, they align policy more in CEDAW's direction.
Okay, right, thanks for that. Is anybody? Yeah, okay.
Tottenham constituency, along with a lot of my colleagues here. Actually, it's not particularly political. I just wanted to say thank you for the discussions today and yesterday, because I think I take away so much. I mean, so much from all the things you've said. And it makes me feel so much stronger in myself in the kind of arguments I have, even with family members, about what the position that I take is right. And it makes me feel so much better. I promise you, I should leave here thinking, yeah, I know where I am, and I know where I belong in a kind of women's setting as well, which is great. I also wanted to pay tribute to the lady from Afghanistan. I come from an ethnic minority background, and I think often we are absolutely unheard on any of these areas. We had a by-election recently in 2 areas with strong, very diverse minority communities. And one of the things that came up on the doorstep is the rights of ID recognition, and whether women are still women. It kept coming up and up again, not just from Labour Party women members, but lots of other people. So I think it's really important. I think the issues that the lady from Afghanistan spoke about, it's really important to pick those kind of areas up and build it into the narrative. Otherwise, it just feels like it's the same old, I'm so sorry, but white middle-class feminist debate, and I'd rather it wasn't anymore. And finally, can I just say that on the surrogacy, I thought it was a really interesting area. It's something I don't know anything about. And I just wondered whether it's possible for us to have a motion, a draft motion that we can all use to take back to our constituencies, because it's actually a complex area, very complex area, especially if it involves the Law Commission. But I think it's something that we could take up, and take up well, if we had the background to it.
Thank you very much. I really appreciate that. Zura, would you like to comment? And my comment is, and you just pointed that out, this sounds like a white, feminist woman's issue. It isn't. Sex and gender is an issue across the world. We see many countries struggling with their legislation, and also it is sex-based everywhere. And so, anyway, Zura, would you like to say something?
I think what I wanted to say, you said it.
Well, that's an easy way out, but thank you very much. Brilliant.
Okay.
Thank you, Zura.
Got one more here.
Next.
Hello.
Go on. Oh, sorry. Go on. Oh, yeah, go on. Sorry. Go on.
Thank you so much for your interest, and thank you for your comments about my speech. We obviously would like to speak to people who would like to know more. Like I said, we do have a briefing which we can share with you for you to send to your MPs. There should be those postcards on your chairs. But the important thing, I think, is to remember that we don't want to wait until this bill is taken forward. We need to talk about it with our MPs and also with your family members, with people who might not be aware of what this bill would do if it was to progress. So, yeah, we would absolutely encourage you to have those conversations and to we mustn't let the bill go forward.
Brilliant. Thank you, Lexi, and apologies for being left side blind. Great. So Zura's going to be available to everybody this evening as well, if you want to talk about her work in Afghanistan. I'm going to take
all the education that I have as well.
Yeah, and she's going to tell you her CV if I missed any bits out. I'm going to take 2 more questions. You've got the microphone there. I can't see anything, honestly. I'm blind.
Shall I go? Is this just a quick... Yeah.
Right, let's go to Louise at the back then.
Thank you. Hello, I'm Louise Irvin, and as well as being actively involved in Labour Women's Declaration, I'm also co-chair of an organisation called Clinical Advisory Network on Sex and Gender, and the reason I'm mentioning it is that we talked about the elimination of the word woman in healthcare and healthcare communication, and CanSG wrote an open letter to all the chief executives of all four nations, NHS and all 4 nations, raising this issue, and we got over 8,000 signatures, including over 1,300 from healthcare practitioners. And I'd like to say that our organisation is not just doctors, it's doctors, nurses, speech therapists, health visitors, psychologists.
Radiographers?
There's 2 radiographers.
Any radiographers in the room?
So any health worker who's interested in joining us, I'm sorry for taking this opportunity, but I think it's actually relevant and it is linked. Please do come and talk to me later about that. Thank you.
Can I say thank you very much? And I don't know if anybody else wants to make a point on this, but you don't see this happening to the word man. Just do it. Look in the mirror. Just say, look, you're erasing the word woman on all words relating to women, but you're not erasing the word man. I'm quite happy for you to use people with a prostrate. Oh, prostrate. I can never say it right because I haven't got one. But you're not. Make things, I'm all for equality. So you erase my word, erase your own word. But let's not erase anybody's words. That's the best way forward. Okay, so thank you for that, really appreciate it. And please go and speak and have those conversations. Anybody want to add anything before I ramble on anymore? Right, okay, well, there's lots of things I need to mention to end off this evening, and one of them is a big, huge thank you to every single person in this room this evening. Give yourselves a round of applause. Now we have a teacher's guide to sex and gender and all our merch in the next room, so you are welcome to stay here until 10:30 p.m. Zura's going to be available as well. I'm not allowed to mention where we are, so nobody mention the venue in any of your social media. And also to say that to those on the live stream, all right, if you've had problems, we'll be putting it online where you can catch anything they've missed. And after the live stream has ended, remind everyone it's fine to tweet, but not to publish pics in the after party of attendees, because I really let my hair down. Okay, so there's plenty of food and drink, and before I go, one last thing, okay? I want to say how wonderful not only the people on this panel tonight been, but to Kerri and to Catherine and to Jane and all of the organising group for tonight's meeting. It is an absolute privilege and an honour to be able to chair this meeting and to participate in the event yesterday. There are many more of us out there in the Labour Party. Let's bring up our sisters, let's call them up, let's tell them about what we've done at Labour Party Conference 2023, and let's get more women standing up and speaking out. Good night, everybody. Let's party.